Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kayla Doyle. I work for the Office of State Procurement. I'm an analyst on the RFP team. I'm here with my coworker, Brad Vanos. He's on the professional contracts team. We're both going to be presenting this training on fundamentals of professional contracts. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them through chat. We will read the questions and provide answers for you guys. Sorry, hang on one second. We're having just a little bit of trouble. Okay, sorry about that. Our objectives for this presentation is going to be to go over the different types of professional service contracts, and we're going to discuss the importance of selecting the correct service type for your contract. There are several laws that govern OSP professional contracts, such as the Louisiana Constitution, Louisiana Revised Statutes, the Louisiana Administrative Code Title 34, and the executive orders that you see listed here for co-ops, line item appropriations, the Hudson Initiative, and emergency procedures. Applicability of law states that all expenditures of public funds by the executive branch of the state, regardless of their source, must follow the laws that govern professional service contracts. There are some exemptions in law, but we're not going to go over that during this class. You can look up the statutes that I have listed here if you need more information on that. There are 7 different types of professional service contracts. You have professional, personal, consulting, social services, interagency, intergovernmental, and cooperative endeavors. We're going to discuss each type. First, we're going to talk about professional. On this slide here, you'll see the different professions listed. You have lawyers, doctors, dentists, psychologists, certified advanced practice nurses, veterinarians, architects, engineers, land surveyors, landscape architects, accountants, actuaries, claims adjusters, pharmacists, and visiting professors. The professions that are listed here on this slide are the only professions allowed to be classified as professional at this time. Other professions may be added by the regulations adopted by the Office of State Procurement in the future. On this list, pharmacists and visiting professors are the recent ones that were added under professional services, and the Louisiana Administrative Code Title 34 has been updated to show those newest professions now classified under professional services. Professional services is one of the non-competitive service types, and by non-competitive, I mean that it's not required to be put out for bid through the RFP process, and professional services have no dollar limit. It's very important for you to classify the types of services being provided correctly. The services must be the usual and customary services for the profession. I'm going to give you an example. If you have a veterinarian that you hire, that vet needs to be providing typical veterinarian services to be classified professional, like giving sick or wellness checkups, vaccinations, x-rays, diagnosing illnesses for animals. Those types of services would be correctly classified as professional. But if you were to hire a veterinarian that needed to, say, come in and speak at a school to children on how to provide for their pets properly, that would not be considered professional. That would actually be considered consulting because he's not performing typical services for his profession, and that would be limited to consulting roles. Next, we're going to talk about personal services. Personal service is work rendered by individuals which require the use of creative or artistic skills, or it requires use of highly technical or unique individual skills or talent. The statute listed here, 39-1556, lists examples such as graphic artist, sculptor, musician, photographer, writer, handwriting analysis or analyst, court reporter, foreign representative, expert witness, paramedical, therapist, private investigator, sign language interpreter, entertainers, and expert speakers. As you can tell from the list, not just anyone can perform these types of work. They all would require some type of creative or technical skills or talent. Personal services is also a non-competitive service type, and so they have no dollar limit. Consulting services is considered work other than professional, personal, or social services rendered by either individuals or firms who possess specialized knowledge, experience, or expertise. Consulting contracts that are classified as consulting are competitive, so they are limited to $74,999 per 12-month period, or they must be competitively procured if that dollar amount is exceeded. There's some examples listed here on the slide. Management, finance, revenue enhancement, planning, data processing, or IT contracts. Again, these are all just examples. There's a lot more that fall under consulting. It's one of those categories that we consider a catch-all. So basically, if it doesn't fit under professional, personal, or social services, then it's usually going to be considered consulting. And next, we have social services. Social service is considered work rendered by any person, firm, corporation, organization, governmental body, or governmental entity in furtherance of the general welfare of the citizens of Louisiana. Contracts that are classified as social services are competitive, so they are limited to $249,999 per 12-month period, or they must be competitively procured if that dollar amount is exceeded. Social services is divided into 5 categories. You have rehabilitation and health support, habilitation and socialization, protection for adults and children, improvement of living conditions and health, evaluation, testing, and remedial educational services. I'm going to read some examples. I would like for you guys to tell me in the chat what number you think the examples I read would fall under. So for the first one, teen pregnancy prevention and Louisiana rehab services. Please tell me, and you can just respond with 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. If you think that those examples would fall under rehabilitation and health support, habilitation and socialization, protections for adult and children, improvement of living conditions and health, or evaluation, testing, and remedial educational services. And I'll give you a minute to respond.
You have a few different responses coming in, mostly 1s, maybe 4, and a 3.
Okay. If you selected option 1, rehabilitation and health support, that's correct. Teen pregnancy prevention and Louisiana rehab services do fall under category 1. Next, we have daycare services and transportation services. Same thing, you guys just take a second and respond and let me know if you think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Lots of different answers on that one as well, mainly 3 and 4.
Okay. It's actually habilitation and socialization. Daycare services and transportation services fall underneath category 2. Next, we have victims of family violence and adoption services. And same thing, do y'all think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
That one's pretty across the board. Everybody agrees that it's 3.
That is correct. It's examples for protection for adults and children. And what about energy assistance and weatherization or distribution of food commodities?
All 4s.
That is correct. And I guess by now, y'all can all see, I've just put them in order, just trying to trick y'all up. The last one, identifying and assessing and evaluating handicapped children, development of individualized educational programs for disabled or handicapped children is examples that would fall under category 5, evaluation, testing, and remedial educational services. Does anybody have any questions about any of the information that I've covered so far, or did any questions come up in chat, Amber? No? If you don't have any questions for me, then at this time, I'm gonna turn it over to Brad, and he's gonna go over the remaining presentation with you, and we'll answer any other questions or anything that comes up at the end. No questions? Okay, Brad?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brad Van Oss. I'm an analyst on the OSP PC side. We're going to start off continuing with interagency contracts. They're governed by RS 39-15-5630. Interagency contracts between executive branch state agencies. They have no dollar limit, so they're exempt from the RFP process. An example of an interagency contract would be LSU and LDH, or Division of Administration and Department of Education. Then we have intergovernmental contracts. They're between a state agency and a political subdivision. That can be local or federal. They're also exempt from the OSP review and approval under RS 39-15-54J2, except for procurement of social services. An example of this would be between Louisiana University and out-of-state universities, say Louisiana University and Louisiana, Alabama, or they could be between the Division of Administration and the City of New Orleans. I'm gonna take a second, and y'all can just answer through chat. I'm gonna read off some examples of interagency or intergovernmental contracts, and y'all in chat tell me whether y'all think it's an agency or governmental contract. All right, the first one is Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism, and the Louisiana Department of the Treasury. All right, that's going to be an agency contract. All right, the next example is DOA Office of Elderly Affairs and Terrebonne Parish Government. Is that going to be an agency or governmental contract?
We did have a question come in, if you could clarify, what would it be if it's a contract between a board and LSU Health and Sciences Center?
That's going to be an interagency contract, because boards fall under the executive branch.
Okay, most of the responses on the last one is governmental.
Okay, and I'll just give one more real quick. Pennington Biomedical Research Center and the Louisiana State Penitentiary.
Mostly interagencies coming.
And that's correct. Interagency is correct. All right, next we're going to talk about cooperative endeavors. These must be sent to OSP PC for approval. Line item appropriation CAs must follow the formats and guidelines on the OSP PC website. CEAs can exceed the limits for consulting and social services, and they can have a term greater than 3 years if needed. Co-ops are allowed by the Louisiana Constitution, Article 7, Section 14C, which states, for a public purpose, the state and its political subdivisions or political corporations may engage in cooperative endeavors with each other, with the United States government or its agencies, or with any public or private association, corporation, or individual. It also states that the funds, credit, property, or things of value of the state shall not be loaned, pledged, or donated to or for any person, association, corporation, public, or private. In 2006, the Louisiana Supreme Court issued a ruling that came to be known as the Cabela case. This is the standard which OSP uses called the three-prong test. Co-ops must have a public purpose. The expenditure or transfer as a whole does not appear to be gratuitous, and the public entity has a demonstrable, objective, and reasonable expectation of receiving equal value. All right, next we're going to go over some minimum contract requirements. All contracts must have beginning and end dates, and they have to be specific. A description of work, and these are your goals and objectives of the contract. They must have a maximum amount. They must have deliverables, schedule of deliverables, performance measures, and a monitoring plan should all be included in the statement of work. Keep in mind, your statement of work needs to be clear, simple, and easy to understand. You also have now a monitoring plan. Your agency has the full responsibility of monitoring the contract, so make sure you list how the contract will be monitored. Responsibility for taxes, termination clauses, remedies for default clause, legislative auditor clause, signability clause, any required anti-discrimination language, travel requirements, fiscal funding clause, and Act 87. Your contract needs to require all the required clauses. If you look on our website, you can find a generic contract template, and it was recently updated and contains the required clauses. And I strongly encourage you to use OSP's template. Doing so will just speed up the review process for everybody, because I won't have to send it back for just something that should be standard in every one of our contracts. Okay, next we'll go over some additional approvals that your contract may or may not need, and that is civil service, attorney general for legal services, office of general counsel for legal services, legislative auditor for financial auditing services of state agencies, office of telecommunications management, the appropriate governing board, Board of Regents, LCTS, CTS, and delegation of authority. Agency signer must have authorization to sign, and the delegation authority from the agency must be sent to OSP for approval. All right, next we have some attachments. You have the BA budget form, the certification letter. This is a letter certifying the agency has complied with everything listed in the letter. A late letter. This is required if the contract is submitted more than 60 days after the start of the contract, and that's 45 days for co-ops. Board resolution, a legal document that says who's allowed to sign on behalf of the corporation, and it is voted on by the board of directors. Disclosure of ownership. This is a form used when the corporation intends to contract with the state. The contractor is required to file with the Secretary of State if they're a for-profit corporation, unless they're publicly traded. A certificate of authority. The contractor is required to file with the Secretary of State if they are out-of-state contractor and will be located in Louisiana for more than 30 days doing business. And that's physically located. Resumes are needed for consulting services. You want to have a resume to ensure the contractor you're doing business with has a background doing the work needed, and it's also needed so we can check to make sure they don't have any ethics issues. And a multi-year later, if the contract is needed, if it's longer than 12 months. And it's not needed if it crosses fiscal years, just if the contract is longer than 12 months. All right, performance evaluations. All right, performance evaluations are required 60 days of completion of services. And some people get this confused. That's not 60 days after the contract ends, but 60 days actually after the contractor finishes all services. And this also includes all contract amendments approved under the delegation of authority. The using agency has full responsibility for diligent administration and monitoring of the contract. If your contract was approved by OSPC, a copy must be sent to OSPC, and a performance evaluation must be submitted to OSPC. And performance evaluations are required for professional, personal, social services, and consulting services. All right, and then the contract was approved in PROACT. The performance evaluation needs to be uploaded in PROACT to that specific contract, not the contract you're trying to get currently approved. And the same in LaGov. If your contract was approved in LaGov, performance evaluation needs to be submitted in LaGov to that contract, not the contract you're trying to get approved now. All right, and this is just our contact information, and, next we'll take some questions.
Okay, first we have, what would a contract be between DOC and LSU?
That's gonna be an agency.
And then what would a contract be between school boards and Department of Education?
That's gonna be governmental.
Okay, the next question we have, is the disclosure of ownership the same as the information that can be obtained publicly from the Secretary of State website?
Correct. If you go to the Secretary of State's website and print out that printout, that is the disclosure of ownership and the certificate of authority all in one. Now, on the bottom of that, you'll see attachments, and it'll say disclosure of ownership. Sometimes they'll apply for Secretary of State, but they haven't submitted their disclosure of ownership. But yeah, that one form will suffice for everything. And that's actually the easiest way to do it, is just go to their website and print that form.
Can we send a draft of a consulting contract for review prior to having the appropriate parties sign so that we can be sure it's okay?
No. We prefer you not to. You can feel free to ask questions, but we just unfortunately just don't have the time to look at every contract for your approval.
Okay, sometimes contractors send us a company resume. Do you require resumes for the individual contractors working on the contract?
Yeah, the resumes are required for not specifically the company, but who's actually going to be doing the work.
Okay, and then we have, what is the difference between a CEA and a co-op?
That's actually the same thing.
Please confirm when a late letter is needed for a cooperative endeavor agreement.
A late letter is needed after 45 days,
Before the start date.
before the start date.
Yeah. It needs to be, they need to have that co-op sent to us 45 days before it starts. So if so basically the co-op has to be here early, and if it's not, then you're gonna need a late letter.
Okay, is there a minimum dollar amount where a contract is needed?
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again?
Is there a minimum dollar amount where a contract is needed?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Feel free to email the help desk on that one, but it would, under $5,000 or your agency's delegation, you might not need a contract, because that would fall under small purchases, depending on the agency.
Oh, that might be what they're asking, what's the minimum that they would have to submit to us, maybe? Yeah, because that's gonna depend on the agency's delegation.
What would be a contract between an LCTCS college and an IWTP subcontractor, social or interagency?
Well, I guess that would depend on what their work they're actually doing. That's gonna depend on the statement of work.
Okay, what was the other document besides disclosure of ownership? Was it the certificate of authority?
Yes, the certificate of authority.
Okay, if we have a consulting teacher lead for $850, that can be a small purchase instead of a contract. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, depending on your agency's delegation.
Okay, let me go to the Q&A. Regarding performance evaluation, I thought this was determined by the end date of the contract. That's how OSP determines if it is requested for the previous purchase order.
It's actually from the ending of when the services are completed.
Which is why when we talk about monitoring plan, we tell you that the agency has whoever's going to monitor the contract, that person should be up to speed as to what's going on with the contract, and that person, should know if the contractor finishes services. So if the contract expires on June 30th, but say the contractor finished up all services in April, then we want that performance evaluation to be submitted to us within 60 days of the date in April, not the end date of the contract. That's why he had explained, a lot of people get it confused and tried to give an example. It needs to be the date the services are completed, not the expiration date of the contract, because contractors finish work early all the time. And whoever's monitoring the contract should know that, and that's the agency's responsibility.
And to be honest, a lot of agencies are not sending in those performance evaluations until they submit the new contracts that they want approved, and we have to go back and ask for the performance evaluation, which holds up the whole process.
Yeah, you don't want it to hold up the approval of the current year contract that you're trying to get approved because it wasn't submitted, you know, within 60 days of the last one expiring.
Okay, where is the performance evaluation uploaded in the prior PROACT transmittal?
There's a specific spot for it.
Yeah, on one of the tabs,
I think it's the attachment tab.
yeah, and you scroll down like middle ways, and there is a section right there, and it says performance evaluation. And when you upload it, it actually kind of sends like a workflow over here to OSP, and we know that it's on there. So we can go in, check it, make sure, you know, it has the right purchase order number and all that kind of information on there. And then we, actually on this side, our professional contracts team enters it into LeGov on the actual PO part.
Okay, what would a contract be between DOTD and the University of Florida?
That's gonna be a governmental contract.
What is the difference between an RFP and a solicitation?
Okay, I wanna take that one.
I actually want to answer another question that come up first, I'm sorry. So just so we're clear, agencies still need to do a contract for services under their delegation. It just doesn't come to OSP for approval. I think there was a little bit of confusion on something
Okay.
there. So I just want to make sure that, y'all are aware of that. So, contracts done under, that are over y'all's delegation, then that's when you need to submit it to OSP for approval.
Okay.
And what was I'm sorry, what was the other question?
What is the difference between an RFP and a solicitation?
Well, you have, you have different requirements, for RFPs and solicitations. So, if you want to send me an email directly, with more, maybe like a specific scenario, I might could explain it better. My email address is kayla.doyle2@la.gov.
Okay.
And that's Doyle, D-O-Y-L-E.
I think they wanted to clarify one of the questions. Are contracts not required for PPCS services under a certain dollar amount? I think you probably covered that when you responded to that question. Okay, so what type of contract is a contract between a Louisiana state agency and a state agency in Oklahoma, and what type of approval is required?
That's gonna be a governmental contract.
Okay. Is it correct that interagency agreements require OSP review, but are exempt from competitive if the contract is being submitted through PROACT? Does the civil service form require prior approval, or just a signed form that will be processed for approval via PROACT? That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Can we break it down? I'm
Let's break
sorry.
it down. Is it correct that interagency agreements require OSP review, but are exempt from competitive?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If the contract is being submitted through PROACT, does civil service form require approval?
So it depends. Civil service, your civil service, approval, there's a website that you can go to, and it has like, exemptions and stuff. And if your contract is exempt for a certain reason from civil service approval, then you don't need it. It doesn't matter whether it's in PROACT or LeGov, if you're a dock tracking agency. If it requires civil service approval, then it's gonna need a signed, approved civil service form.
It also doesn't matter what contract type it is.
Yeah. It just depends on if that particular contract is exempt, and you can find out exactly what exemptions there are. They have some just overall exemptions for all agencies, and then there's some specific exemptions for specific agencies, and it's all listed, on the civil service website.
Okay. Can an agency have a DPA for professional services higher than the $20,000 per year?
They're authorized for 20,000, and they wanted to know. So,
That would depend on your agency's delegation.
yeah, those approvals are given. So, if the agency feels that there's a need for an increase in delegation, that'd be something that they would have to request, and it would have to be approved.
Okay. In order to comply with the new revised statute, will OSP be providing sample contract language to insert into agreements for contractors who have access to our IT assets?
Yes.
think they're working on that. Does OSP obtain the performance measures for all contracts?
Just the contracts that require them. And then if it's also done under your delegation, we still need to have a copy
Of the performance
of the
evaluation,
performance evaluation, yes. So the quick answer is yes.
You send that because even if you guys approved it, you still did a contract, there's a PO number, so we're gonna go in and take that performance evaluation and attach it to the PO, just to keep a record.
And also the auditors might request it
Correct.
at some point if your agency's being audited, and we'll have a copy of it for you.
Okay. Are all of the non-competitive contracts listed on the ECAT search?
That would be all the RFPs, are they listed? Yeah, all the contracts are listed.
Okay. I guess this one's going back a little bit to the contract between like a Louisiana and an Oklahoma state agency. Which governing law provision would apply?
That's gonna be RS 39-1556-24. And they're exempt from OSP review except for procurement of social services. That's the little caveat with the,
Okay. Regarding CEAs, would a CEA where no funds are transferred from the agency to the contractor, but instead funds transfer from the contractor to the state, does that have to go through OSP?
yes, all co-ops.
All co-ops have to come to
co-ops.
us.
And unless anybody has any other questions, that looks like that's it for the chat and the Q&As. Oh, one more just popped in. All competitive contracts are submitted through a bidding process via the shopping cart?
Yes, that's
Yes.
what it does, yes.
Well, I mean, not just a regular PC, not if, okay, hold on. Let's just make sure, because you,
Right.
if it's over the limit and you're gonna need to go through like an RFP process or something, then yes, it's gonna come like a shopping cart. But if it's just a regular, consulting service contract that falls underneath the limit, say you have it's gonna be 1 year for $70,000, well, that's under the threshold. So that, you would not send that as a shopping cart. You would do your purchase order, and you're gonna, send it over just like you would for professional, personal, social, any of the other ones. The shopping carts are, if it's gonna be over that threshold and it's gonna be going to, through the RFP process, or looked at like that. Sorry, Brad. I just wanted to clarify.
No, yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? Is it a requirement to send the actual purchase order to the vendor that is awarded a contract?
No. No, that's not a requirement.
No, that's gonna be internal. They don't ever need to see how we're paying them.
Okay, if that's it, thank you guys for, listening in. We really appreciate it. Hopefully, this information helps you, and
And
if any other questions come up,
yeah, you have our, help desk emails still on screen. Just email us any other further questions you might have.
yes, or you can email us directly.
Bye, thank you all.